So we already in our previous lectures we have talked a lot about what is bipolarity and what were the two main power blocks, and then finally a third element, and that was the coming up of the non-aligned movement. Okay. We have also talked about that India was one of the founder of the non-aligned movement and had played a major role in the setting up the non-aligned movement and in participating in the summits, the first summit that was held at Belgrade. So today we will be talking about, moving ahead, we will be talking about the India and the Cold War. Now, first of all, that we can divide India's response to the Cold War into two main parts. First, some people say that India just wanted to stay away from the alliances, and secondly, India wanted to voice against the newly decolonized countries joining the alliance. Because as I told you earlier, that many new decolonized countries, many small countries, they joined these superpowers in search of the economic aid and in search of protection. So basically, India was against this aspect of the least developed countries joining these superpowers just because of their safety point. Secondly, we should not confuse, as I told earlier, that non-aligned movement should not be confused with neutrality. Similarly, India's policy also was neither passive nor negative. Now, what does it mean? It means that India neither wanted to remain silent nor it wanted to voice its thoughts against these both superpowers. Secondly, Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru made it very clear that India's policy was not a policy of fleeing away. India was not running away from the problem. In fact, India was actively intervening in world affairs to soften the Cold War rivalries. Now, coming up later on, if you say that what was the impact on the non-aligned movement on India, so the impact was this: that firstly, this movement allowed India to make international decisions. Secondly, India was also able to balance one superpower over other. Now, what does it mean? It means that India was free to join any superpower for one reason or the other. But this concept, this aspect of India was criticized by many countries. And what were the main two modes of criticism? The first point was, they said that India's non-alignment was unprincipled. Secondly, they said that India was inconsistent, means India was not clear as to what superpower India is supporting. But later on, India signed a treaty of friendship in August 1971 with USSR for 20 years. Now, this treaty highlighted India's need for diplomatic and military support from USSR. And this relationship with USSR went a long way. And India had a very close relationship with Soviet Union, or we can say USSR. With this, we come to the end of this first chapter of the world politics, and that is the Cold War era. Before we sum up with the chapter, there are a few arms control treaties which are mentioned that you should be aware of, and many of you must have already heard about it. First is the LBT, that is the Limited Test Ban Treaty. Now, this treaty was signed by US, UK and USSR in 1963 on 5th of August. It came into force a pretty later on after that, but it was signed on 5th August 1963, and basically this treaty was to put a ban on the use of weapons. The second and a very talked about treaty was the NPT, that was a Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, where only 5 countries, that is US, USSR, Britain, France and China, they were allowed to keep nuclear weapons. Other than these countries, no other country could test or could possess nuclear weapons. This treaty was signed on 1st of July 1968. Coming up later with two more treaties like SALT 1, that is the Strategic Arms Limitation Task Part 1, which it was enforced on 3rd of October 1972 and which was later on followed by the Strategic Arms Limitation Task Part 2, which was enforced here, which was signed from 18th June 1979. Both of these was basically to put limitations on the use of anti-ballistic missiles. So this was all about the Cold War era, and this era was very important. Why? Because after this era, after the end of this Cold War era, we will be talking about a very important aspect of the world politics, and that is when the entire politics was only concentrated in one hand, and that was the American bloc, or you could say the end of the bipolarity. But before that, after this chapter, we will be continuing with the first chapter of the other book, in which we will be talking about the Indian politics after independence.